The most powerful man in the city froze when he saw the woman who once saved him, because she looked him in the eyes and pretended she had never met him. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from today. And if you love emotional mafia romance stories with secrets, reunions, and powerful twists, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The ballroom glittered with the kind of wealth that didn't need to introduce itself. Crystal chandeliers poured light over polished marble floors. A string quartet played something soft and expensive in the corner. Men in tailored tuxedos spoke in low, confident tones about investments and influence, while women in silk and diamonds moved through the room like they belonged to it. Dante Moretti owned rooms like this. He didn't smile much, didn't need to. Power sat on him the way a shadow sits on the ground, constant, undeniable. Conversations shifted when he entered. People noticed without looking like they were noticing. That was how it worked at his level. Attention without acknowledgement, respect without invitation. He stood near the edge of the room, one hand wrapped loosely around a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched, his gaze moving, not idly, never idly. Dante didn't scan a room the way ordinary men did. He cataloged it. Exits, threats, alliances, faces, and then everything stopped. Not the music, not the movement, not the low murmur of voices, just him. Because across the room, weaving between guests with a silver tray balanced effortlessly in her hand, was a woman who did not belong here, and yet somehow moved through it with a quiet, practiced grace. Dark hair pulled back in a simple knot, black server's uniform, clean but unremarkable. No jewelry except a thin chain at her throat, her posture straight, her expression neutral in the way of someone trained to be invisible. But Dante Moretti did not believe in invisible things, not when he had seen her before, not when he knew that face. Elena Vale. The name hit him like something physical, like a memory forced into the present without permission. Years collapsed in a single breath. The ballroom, the music, the people, none of it mattered anymore. She stepped closer, offering champagne to a group of donors who barely looked at her. One of them laughed too loudly at something unimportant. Another waved her off without meeting her eyes. She didn't react. She simply moved on. Dante watched her the way a man watches something he thought he had lost to time. There was no mistake. Not in the line of her jaw, not in the way she held herself, not in the quiet steadiness of her movements. He had spent years forgetting faces on purpose. It was part of survival. But hers had never left. Because years ago, when he had been bleeding out in an alley with a price on his head and no one left to trust, she had been the only one who stopped. The only one who didn't run. The only one who looked at him, not as a threat, not as a problem, but as a man who needed help. And now she was here, alive, within arm's reach. Dante set his glass down without realizing he had done it. His body had already decided before his mind caught up. He moved through the crowd, not fast, not slow, the way he always moved, the way men moved when they knew the world would part for them. And it did. People stepped aside without thinking. Conversations paused mid-sentence. A path opened. But Dante wasn't looking at any of them. He was looking at her. Elena. He said her name quietly, but it carried. It always did. She turned. For a moment, one small, fragile moment, the world aligned exactly the way it was supposed to. Her eyes met his, and something flickered. Not confusion, not surprise, recognition. It was there. He saw it, clear as a blade catching light. Her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around the tray. Her breath paused, just for a second. She knew him. Dante felt it settle in his chest with absolute certainty. And then, it was gone. The flicker disappeared like it had never existed. Her expression smoothed into polite neutrality, the kind reserved for strangers, the kind you wear when nothing matters and no one is important. "Yes, sir?" she said. "Sir?" The word landed wrong, cold, distant, deliberate. Dante didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe the way he was supposed to. He studied her face, searching for the crack, the slip, the truth she had just hidden. But she held steady, too steady. "I think you're mistaken," she added gently when he didn't respond. "Would you like champagne?" As if he were just another man in the room, as if she had never seen him before, as if she had never stitched his skin together with shaking hands in a dim apartment that smelled like antiseptic and fear, as if she had never saved his life. Something dark and sharp shifted beneath Dante's ribs. Not anger, not yet. Something colder. Because he knew lies. He built an empire on recognizing them. And this was not the lie of a woman who didn't know him. This was the lie of a woman who needed him to believe she didn't. Dante leaned in slightly, just enough that only she could hear him. "You remember," he said quietly. Not a question. A statement. Her fingers tightened again on the tray. He saw it this time. The smallest fracture in the performance. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. "I'm sorry," she said. "I think you have me confused with someone else." And then she stepped past him. Just like that. No hesitation, no backward glance, no sign that anything had happened at all. She moved deeper into the crowd, offering drinks, nodding politely, disappearing into the rhythm of the room like she had never stopped to speak to him in the first place. Dante Moretti stood in the center of a room full of powerful people and felt something he had not felt in years. Uncertainty. His jaw tightened slightly. His gaze followed her as she slipped between bodies and conversations, becoming smaller, farther, harder to reach. But not gone. Never gone. Because Dante knew two things with absolute, unshakable certainty. Elena Vale remembered him. And whatever reason she had for pretending otherwise, was big enough to make her lie to the one man who could see straight through her. It had been raining that night too. Not the soft kind that feels romantic from behind glass, but the cold, relentless kind that soaks through fabric and settles into bone. The kind that makes the city feel empty even when it isn't. Dante Moretti had learned a long time ago that rain was useful. It washed things away. Blood, footprints, evidence. But that night, it wasn't enough. He stumbled into the alley already knowing he wasn't going to make it much farther. His breathing was uneven, each inhale sharp and shallow, each exhale heavier than the last. The wound in his side burned with every step, hot and wet beneath his jacket. Betrayal always felt like that. Not just the injury, the realization. The understanding that someone you trusted had calculated your absence and decided the world would be better without you in it. He pressed his hand harder against his ribs, feeling the blood slip between his fingers. Too much. He knew enough to know it was too much. The city blurred around him, lights smeared into streaks, sounds came in waves, distant and distorted. He turned into the alley because it was there, because it was dark, because it was the last place anyone would look. Dante made it 3 more steps before his legs gave out. He hit the ground hard, the impact knocking what little air he had left from his lungs. For a moment, he just lay there, staring up at the strip of gray sky between buildings, rain hitting his face in sharp, cold bursts. This was how it ended then. Not in a blaze of violence, not in some dramatic final stand, just here. Alone. He closed his eyes. Footsteps. At first he thought he imagined them, just another sound in a city full of them, but they got closer, slower, cautious. Dante's eyes snapped open. A figure stood at the mouth of the alley, half-shadowed, hesitating. A woman. She should have run. Anyone with sense would have. A bleeding man in a dark alley was not something you approached. It was something you avoided, ignored, pretended not to see. Dante pushed himself up slightly, just enough to make it clear he wasn't dead yet. "Keep walking," he rasped. His voice sounded wrong, thinner than it should have been. The woman didn't move. Rain slicked her hair to her face. She wore a worn coat, one hand gripping the strap of a bag slung over her shoulder. Her eyes, wide, alert, took him in quickly. The blood. The way he was holding his side. The way he was trying and failing to look like a threat. He saw the moment she understood what she was looking at. Not a drunk, not a mugging gone wrong. Something worse. She should have turned around. Instead, she stepped closer. Dante's jaw tightened. "I said go." She ignored him. That, more than anything, made something shift in his focus. People didn't ignore him, not even then. Not when he was younger, smaller, still building his name. There was something in him people recognized, something that made them hesitate. She didn't. She crouched a few feet away, not too close, but close enough to see better. "You're bleeding," she said. No panic, no dramatics, just fact. "I noticed," he muttered. Her gaze flicked to his hand pressed against his side. If you stay here, you're going to die. There it was. Another fact. Delivered the same way. Dante let out something that might have been a laugh if it didn't hurt so much. Then you should definitely leave. She hesitated then, just for a second, and Dante saw it. The internal calculation, fear versus something else, something quieter, stubborn. Then she made her decision. Can you stand? She asked. He blinked at her. What? Can you stand? She repeated, sharper now. Because if you can, I can get you out of here, but we don't have time to argue about it. Dante stared at her like she had lost her mind. You don't even know me. I know you're bleeding through your jacket, she said. That's enough. Rain dripped from the edge of her hair onto her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. Dante studied her for a long second. Then, because he didn't have better options, and because something in her voice told him she meant it, he nodded once. Fine. Getting up was harder than he expected. The world tilted violently, his vision narrowing at the edges. But she was there, closer now, her arm braced under his, smaller than him, but steady in a way that mattered. Don't pass out, she said. Not planning to. Good. Stick to that. He almost smiled. They moved slowly, painfully, out of the alley and into the street. No one paid them much attention. A man leaning on a woman in the rain wasn't unusual enough to look twice at. That was the thing about cities. You could disappear in plain sight. Her apartment was 3 blocks away, a narrow walk-up with flickering hallway lights and stairs that creaked under their weight. By the time they reached the 2nd floor, Dante was running on instinct alone. She got the door open with one hand, guiding him inside quickly before anyone could see. The apartment was small. One room that served as both living space and bedroom. A narrow kitchen tucked into the corner, a window that rattled slightly with the wind. It smelled faintly of detergent and something herbal. Safe. Dante barely made it to the chair before he collapsed into it. Stay with me, she said, already moving. Her bag hit the table. She pulled out supplies with practiced efficiency, gloves, gauze, a small kit that looked like it had been used often. You're a nurse, he said, his voice rough. Student, she corrected. Sit still. She cut through his shirt without hesitation. The fabric peeled away, revealing the wound, deep, angry, still bleeding steadily. She inhaled sharply. Yeah, Dante said. That's about right. She didn't respond. Her focus shifted completely, her earlier hesitation gone. This version of her was different, controlled, precise. Gunshot, she murmured. Exit wound? No. Okay. She worked quickly, cleaning the wound, her hands steady even when his body tensed under the pain. Try not to move. Helpful advice. Do you want me to stop? No. Then be quiet. That time, he did smile. It didn't last long. The pain was too much, the exhaustion heavier with every passing minute, but he stayed conscious. Barely. Through it all, she didn't falter. She stitched him up at her small kitchen table, under a single overhead light that buzzed faintly. She spoke only when necessary. Instructions, warnings. When she finished, she stepped back, pulling off her gloves. You're not dying tonight, she said. It wasn't reassurance. It was a conclusion. Dante leaned back in the chair, his head hitting the wall behind him. Good, he muttered. That would have been inconvenient. She almost smiled at that. Almost. Then her expression shifted again, softer now, the edges of her focus fading. You can stay here, she said after a moment, just for tonight. You shouldn't move. Dante looked at her. Really looked at her. Rain still clung to her hair. Her clothes were damp. There was a small crease between her brows, like she was already worrying about the consequences of what she had done. You shouldn't have helped me, he said quietly. I know. People might come looking. I know. Then why? She met his eyes, and for the first time, there was something unguarded there. Because you needed help, she said simply. No grand reasoning, no justification, just that. Dante held her gaze for a long moment, then he nodded once. That night, he slept in a place that wasn't his, under a roof that didn't belong to him, because a stranger had decided his life was worth the risk. And years later, with power, with money, with a city that bent around him, it was still the safest he had ever felt. Dante did not leave the gala. Most men would have. Most men would have taken the insult, the confusion, the quiet dismissal wrapped in politeness, and walked away with their pride intact. Dante Moretti did not build an empire by walking away from things that didn't make sense. He stayed exactly where he was, just off the edge of the room, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable to anyone who didn't know better. But he wasn't watching the room anymore. He was watching her. Elena moved the way she had that night years ago. Controlled, efficient, careful not to draw attention, she slipped between clusters of people, refilled glasses, collected empty ones, nodded when spoken to, disappeared when she wasn't. Invisible. Except she wasn't. Not to him. Dante noticed everything. The way her shoulders stayed just slightly tense, like she was bracing for something that hadn't happened yet. The way her eyes never lingered too long in one place, always moving, always aware. The way she avoided certain corners of the room, angles that would leave her exposed, and most of all, the way she avoided him, not casually, not naturally, deliberately. She did not look in his direction again, not once. Even when he shifted position, even when he stepped into spaces where she would have to pass near him, she adjusted her path with subtle precision. Too precise. That wasn't indifference. Indifference forgets. This was calculation. Dante's jaw tightened slightly as he watched her decline to meet his gaze for the third time. A woman who truly didn't know him would have looked again, out of curiosity, if nothing else. People always did. But Elena Vale was pretending not to see him at all, which meant she knew exactly where he was. The realization settled into something sharp and quiet in his chest. Fear, not of him, of something else. Dante pushed off the wall. This time, he didn't call her name. He moved through the room the way he always did, unhurried, inevitable, and intercepted her at the edge of a quieter hallway just beyond the main ballroom. She had just stepped through the doors, tray balanced in one hand when he reached out and closed his fingers lightly around her wrist. Not forceful, but firm enough that she couldn't ignore it. She froze. The reaction was immediate, instinctive, too fast to be performed. For a split second, her composure cracked completely. Her body went still in a way that wasn't controlled, wasn't chosen. It was the stillness of someone who had just been caught. Dante felt it. Then she turned, and just like that, the mask slipped back into place. "Yes, sir," she said again, her voice calm, polite, perfectly neutral. "Sir," again. Dante released her wrist slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. "Walk with me," he said, not a request. She hesitated. There it was again, that fraction of a second where something real surfaced. Her gaze flicked toward the ballroom, toward the crowd, toward the exits. Calculating, measuring risk. Then she nodded once. "Of course." They walked side by side down the hallway, away from the noise, away from the lights. The air was quieter here, the sounds of the gala softened into a distant hum. Dante stopped near a window that overlooked the dark city below. He turned to face her. She stopped a step away, her posture straight, her expression composed. But up close, the cracks were impossible to miss. Her breathing was just slightly too shallow. Her fingers, still curled around the edge of the tray, were tight enough to turn her knuckles pale. And her eyes wouldn't settle. They moved between his face and the space just over his shoulder, never quite locking in place for more than a second at a time. Dante studied her in silence. "You're not a good liar," he said finally. Her chin lifted just slightly. "I'm not lying." "You are," he replied calmly. "And you know that I know you are." A pause. The air between them shifted. Elena held his gaze then. Really held it. And for a moment the performance dropped. Not completely, but enough. Enough for him to see it clearly. Fear. Not the kind that panics, not the kind that runs, the kind that calculates survival. "I think you're mistaken," she said quietly. Dante took a step closer. Not enough to crowd her, just enough to remove the distance she was trying to maintain. "Elena," he said, her name lower now, sharper. "You stitched a bullet wound in my side at a kitchen table that barely stood on its own. You told me not to move while your hands were shaking. You let a man you didn't know bleed in your apartment because you decided his life was worth the risk. Her breath hitched. There? A real reaction. Her fingers tightened further around the tray, the metal edge digging into her palm. But she didn't speak. Dante's voice softened just slightly. You remember? It wasn't a challenge this time. It was something else, something closer to certainty. Elena's eyes flickered again, toward the hallway behind him this time, checking, listening. Dante noticed. Of course he did. He followed the movement instinctively, his attention shifting just enough to register what she was looking for. Not someone specific, but the possibility of someone. Watching. Waiting. When he looked back at her, something inside him had already changed. This wasn't about pride anymore, or curiosity. This was about understanding the shape of the threat she was standing inside. Elena, he said again, quieter now. What are you afraid of? The question landed between them like something fragile. She went very still. Not the earlier stillness. This one was controlled, chosen. And that told him more than anything else she could have said. Because people who weren't afraid didn't choose stillness that carefully. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was steady. I'm not afraid. Dante tilted his head slightly. No, he said. You are. Another pause, longer this time. The silence stretched until it almost broke. Then, she leaned in just enough that anyone passing by would think she was simply speaking quietly to a guest. But her voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. You need to leave me alone. The words were soft, but there was nothing soft about the meaning behind them. Dante didn't move. That's not going to happen. Her eyes closed briefly, just for a second. When they opened again, the fear was still there, but now it was sharper, urgent. Please, she said, and that was what confirmed it. Not the denial, not the lie, not the avoidance, the please. Elena Vale had never struck him as someone who begged, which meant whatever she was afraid of was bigger than him, bigger than his name, bigger than everything he had become. She straightened then, the mask sliding back into place once more, flawless and distant. Enjoy your evening, sir, she said. And this time, when she walked away. Dante didn't try to stop her. He just stood there, watching her disappear back into the light, and made a decision. Because someone had taught Elena Vale to be afraid enough to forget him, and Dante Moretti did not tolerate fear. When it belonged to someone who had once saved his life, Dante did not sleep that night. He rarely did when something didn't add up. And Elena Vale did not add up. By morning, the gala was already irrelevant. The donors, the speeches, the polite conversations, they faded into the background the way unimportant things always did. What remained was a single, precise question that refused to loosen its grip. What happened to her? Dante sat in his office. The city stretched out beneath the glass walls, gray and quiet in the early hours. A cup of coffee sat untouched at his side. Across from him, a man in a tailored suit scrolled through a tablet, waiting for instructions. Dante didn't look at him. Everything, he said. The man nodded once. Name? Dante's gaze lifted slightly, distant and focused at the same time. Elena Vale. There was no hesitation in the response, no follow-up questions. In Dante's world, everything meant exactly that. Records, work history, education, financials, medical, social, every footprint a person leaves behind, willingly or not. The man stood. I'll have something by this afternoon. Have everything, Dante corrected quietly. A pause, then a nod. Yes, sir. By the time the sun had climbed high enough to cast sharp lines across the office floor, the first file was placed in front of him. Dante opened it without ceremony. The photograph clipped to the corner was recent. Elena standing outside a building that looked like it had seen better decades. Her hair pulled back, her coat worn but clean, her expression neutral in that same careful way he had seen the night before. Invisible if you didn't know where to look. Dante did. He turned the page. Employment? 2 jobs. One listed as event staff, temporary irregular hours, catering companies, private events, charity galas. The kind of work that required long nights, constant movement, and left no space for stability. The second, care aide, part-time, home-based. Dante's eyes narrowed slightly as he continued. Medical notes, not hers, someone else's. A name appeared repeatedly in the file. Margaret Vale. Age 62, chronic illness, degenerative, ongoing care required. Dante leaned back slightly in his chair. So that was where her time went. Working nights, caring for someone during the day, running on exhaustion and obligation. He turned another page. Financials, sparse, consistent but barely enough. Rent paid on time, utilities managed, no debt that suggested recklessness, no spending that suggested comfort, survival, nothing more. Dante's jaw tightened just slightly. This was not the life of someone who lacked ability. This was the life of someone who had been forced into limitation. He flipped to the next section. Education, that was where it changed. Nursing program, top of her class. Recommendations from professors that read like certainty. Dedicated, intelligent, exceptional under pressure. Clinical evaluations marked with the same language. Precise, reliable, promising. Dante's gaze lingered there. Promising. Past tense. The next line answered why. Withdrawal. Abrupt. No formal explanation. Date. Dante stilled. The date matched. Exactly. The same week he had been in her apartment. The same week she had stitched him up, hidden him, lied for him. The same week men had been hunting him through the city. Something cold settled into place in his chest. He continued reading. There was nothing after that. No transfer to another program, no re-enrollment, no attempt to return. Just nothing. Like a door that had been closed and never opened again. Dante set the file down slowly. The silence in the room shifted. He reached for another page. Address. A small apartment in a part of the city most people with options didn't choose. He didn't need more than that. But he kept reading anyway. Neighbors interviewed, quiet, keeps to herself. Works a lot, takes care of her mother. No trouble, no visitors, no attention. Dante exhaled slowly. No attention. That was deliberate. He knew the difference between a life that became small and a life that was made small. Elena's had been made. The question was, by who? His gaze drifted back to the date on the page. The week everything stopped. The week she helped him. The week he disappeared into a war that ended with him on top. And she disappeared into something else entirely. Dante stood. The movement was quiet, controlled, but final in a way that meant the thinking part was over. Now came action. Get me everything from that week, he said without turning. The man across the room looked up immediately. Everything? Hospital reports, police activity, calls, names. Dante's voice was calm, but there was something beneath it now, something harder. Anyone who was looking for me. A beat. And to anyone who found her instead. The man hesitated, only slightly, then nodded. Understood. Dante walked toward the window, his reflection faint against the glass. For years he had built something untouchable. Control, power, distance. And somewhere in the process, he had convinced himself that what happened in the past stayed there. Contained, finished. But Elena Vale was standing in the present, living a life that didn't match who she had been, working herself into exhaustion, hiding, making herself small enough not to be noticed, because something had taught her that being seen came with consequences. Dante's reflection looked back at him, sharper now, colder, because he knew exactly when her life had changed. He just didn't know yet. How much of that change had his name written all over it? And that was not a question he was going to leave unanswered. Dante did not wait. He had spent enough time watching, enough time piecing together fragments that all pointed in the same direction. Elena's life had not shrunk on its own. It had been pressed into something smaller, and he knew exactly when it started. That was enough. He found her 2 nights later, not at a gala, not in a crowded room where she could disappear into movement and noise. He found her where her real life existed. A quiet street, dim lights, a narrow building with peeling paint, and a stairwell that echoed when someone moved too quickly. The kind of place people passed without seeing. Dante stood across the street for a moment, watching the second-floor window where a soft light glowed behind thin curtains. He didn't hesitate long. He crossed, climbed the stairs, and knocked once. No answer. He knocked again. This time there was movement inside, light footsteps, a pause near the door, then her voice. "Who is it?" Calm, but not relaxed. Dante didn't soften it. "Elena." Silence. Long enough to confirm everything he already suspected. He heard the shift in her breathing through the door, the quiet, controlled inhale of someone bracing. Then the lock clicked. The door opened just enough for her to stand in the frame, one hand still gripping the edge like she might close it again if she needed to. She looked exactly the same, and completely different. No uniform, no tray, just a simple sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. But the same tension lived in her posture. The same awareness sat behind her eyes. "You shouldn't be here," she said. No surprise, no pretense this time. Dante studied her for a second, then stepped forward. She didn't move to stop him. That told him more than anything else. He walked inside, closed the door behind him. The apartment was small, clean, sparse. The air carried that same faint scent he remembered, something herbal, something careful. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, "Who came for you?" he asked. Her head snapped up slightly. There was no confusion in her expression, no denial, just the immediate recognition of exactly what he meant. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. It wasn't convincing. Dante took a step closer. "Elena." Her name sounded different now, less like recognition, more like pressure. "I know when your life changed," he continued. "I know when you left school. I know what you were supposed to become." Her jaw tightened. "And I know it lines up perfectly with the night you helped me." That was the crack, small, but real. Her eyes flickered away from his for just a second, toward the floor. "Stop," she said quietly. Dante didn't. "Men were looking for me," he said, "and they didn't find me." A beat. "They found you instead." Her breathing faltered. That was it. Confirmation. The silence stretched heavy and tight until it snapped. "They came 3 days later," she said. Her voice was different now, not controlled, not careful, just tired. Dante didn't move. "They knocked on the door like it was nothing," she continued, her gaze unfocused, somewhere far from the room. "Like they belonged there. Like they had every right to be standing in my hallway, asking questions about a man I was supposed to forget." Her hands dropped to her sides, fingers curling slightly. "I told them I didn't know anything." Dante watched her closely. "And they smiled," she said. That part, she almost laughed, a hollow, quiet sound. They smiled like that was the wrong answer. The room felt smaller suddenly, quieter. "What did they do?" Dante asked. Elena shook her head once. "Nothing dramatic," she said. "That's the thing. It wasn't violence, not the kind you can point to." She looked at him then, directly. "They just made it clear that they knew everything about me." Her voice dropped. "My school, my classes, my schedule, where I worked, where my mother lived." Dante felt something cold settle into his chest. "They told me accidents happen," she said. "People disappear, opportunities vanish, and sometimes it doesn't happen all at once. Sometimes it happens slowly, piece by piece, until there's nothing left to go back to." A pause. "I believed them." Of course she did. Dante's hands curled slightly at his sides. "So I stopped," she continued. "I stopped asking questions. I stopped talking about that night. I stopped being visible." Her lips pressed together. "I left school before they could take it from me. I quit before I could be pushed. I made myself small enough that no one would think I was worth looking at twice." Dante exhaled slowly. "And it worked?" She gave a small nod. "Yes." Another silence, thicker now, more dangerous. "And you thought pretending not to know me would protect me?" he asked. Her eyes sharpened slightly. "It wasn't about protecting you," she said. That surprised him. "Then what?" "It was about not starting it again." Her voice was steady now, clear. You're not the same man you were then, Dante. I know that. Anyone with eyes can see that. She gestured vaguely, meaning everything. His name, his power, the weight he carried now. But the people who came to my door, she continued, they didn't care who you were becoming. They cared that you existed. A beat. And I learned the hard way that being connected to you, any version of you, comes with consequences. Dante held her gaze. So you erased me? Yes? The answer came without hesitation, without apology. I had to. Another pause, long, heavy. I couldn't go through that again, she said more quietly. I couldn't risk them coming back. Not for me. Not for... She stopped herself. Too late. Dante caught it. Not for what? His eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't push. Not yet. Instead, he stepped closer. Close enough now that the distance between them meant something. Elena, he said, his voice lower, more controlled than before. You think this ended because you stayed quiet? She didn't answer. You think men like that just disappear? He continued. Her silence was answer enough. Dante shook his head once. No, he said. They stop when they think the problem is gone. Her breath caught, and there it was again. Fear. But this time, it wasn't just for herself. Dante saw it clearly now, and that changed everything, because Elena Vale hadn't pretended not to know him out of indifference, or resentment, or even survival alone. She had done it because somewhere in her mind, the threat had never actually ended. It had just gone quiet, and she had built her entire life around keeping it that way. Dante looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, "It's not over." And for the first time since he walked into that apartment, Elena looked afraid of what that meant. Dante didn't move. The words he had just spoken, "It's not over," still hung in the air between them, heavy and irreversible. He watched Elena carefully, the way he watched everything when the truth was close but not fully revealed, because something had shifted. He had seen it in the way she stopped mid-sentence earlier, the way her voice had caught, the way fear had sharpened into something else. Not just fear. Protection. Dante knew the difference. Elena, he said quietly, his tone changing. Less force now, more precision. Not for what? She shook her head immediately, too fast. It doesn't matter. It does. It doesn't, she repeated, firmer now, stepping back slightly as if distance might give her control again. You know enough. You know why I stayed away. That's all you need. Dante didn't follow her movement. He stayed exactly where he was. That's not how this works, he said, her jaw tightened. It is for me. Silence stretched between them, thin and fragile. Then Dante spoke again, softer this time, but somehow more dangerous because of it. You think I would walk away from this now? Her eyes flickered. That's exactly what you should do. I don't do should, he replied. A beat. Elena. Her name landed differently this time. Not pressure, not command, something steadier. Look at me. She didn't want to. He could see it in the way her shoulders tensed, in the way her gaze hovered somewhere just below his, refusing to meet it fully. But slowly, she did. And whatever she saw in his face made something in hers shift. Crack. You don't get to decide what I know, he said quietly. Not when it concerns me. Not when it concerns what happened to you because of me. Her breath hitched. That's not fair. Fair stopped mattering the second men came to your door. The words landed. Hard. Elena looked away again, her hands pressing against the edge of the counter behind her like she needed something solid to hold on to. You don't understand, she said. Well, then help me. A long pause, the kind that feels like standing at the edge of something you can't take back once you step off. I thought you were dead. The words came out suddenly, quiet, flat. Dante stilled. What? She let out a breath that wasn't steady. After that night, you left before I woke up, she said. There was blood everywhere. You could barely stand. I didn't know if you made it out of the city, if they found you, if... She stopped, swallowed. I didn't hear anything. No news, no names, nothing. And then those men came, and I realized it didn't matter whether you were alive or dead. To them, you were still something worth hunting. Dante said nothing. He let her continue. So I made a decision, she said. I cut it off. Completely. No connection. No memory. Nothing they could trace back to you. Her voice tightened. It was the only way I knew how to make it stop. Dante's gaze didn't leave her face. That's not everything. She froze. He saw it again. That hesitation. That second layer she was still trying to keep hidden. Elena, he said, quieter now. You're still protecting something. No. Yes. She shook her head more forcefully this time. There's nothing else. Dante stepped closer. Not aggressively, just enough. You're lying again. Her eyes flashed. Stop saying that. Then stop doing it. The words came out sharper than before, and that was what broke it. The control she had been holding on to, the careful balance, the practiced restraint, it slipped. Her hand came up to her face, pressing briefly against her mouth like she was trying to hold something in. But it was too late. I didn't have a choice, she said, her voice cracking for the first time. Dante's chest tightened. About what? She laughed then, a small, broken sound that didn't belong in the room. About any of it, she said. About what happened after you left, about what they threatened, about what it turned into. Her hand dropped slowly, and she looked at him, really looked at him. I found out 3 weeks later. The words were quiet. Careful, Dante felt something shift instinctively, even before he understood why. Found out what? He asked. Elena's lips parted, closed, opened again. I was pregnant. The world didn't stop. But something inside Dante did. The room, the walls, the air. It all seemed to pull inward, narrowing until there was only her voice, her face, and the weight of what she had just said. Dante didn't speak, didn't move, because for the first time in a very long time, he didn't immediately know what to do with the information in front of him. Elena continued before he could respond. I didn't tell anyone, she said quickly. Not my school, not my co-workers, no one. Because by then I understood what those men were capable of. Her voice steadied slightly, but her eyes didn't. If they knew, if they even suspected, she shook her head. A child would have been leverage, against you, against me, against everything. Dante's jaw tightened. Where is the child? The question came out lower than he intended. More controlled, more dangerous. Elena's breath caught. Then, at home, she said. 2 words, simple, devastating. Dante closed his eyes briefly, just for a second. When he opened them again, something had changed. Not his control, never that, but the depth of what was now at stake. You let me believe, he started, then stopped himself. Number. That wasn't the right direction. This wasn't about blame. It was about reality. You carried this alone, he said instead. Elena gave a small, almost bitter smile. I've carried everything alone. Dante looked at her. Really looked. At the exhaustion she wore like a second skin, at the life she had built out of caution and silence, at the years he had not been there. And for the first time since he had walked into that apartment, Dante Moretti felt something dangerously close to regret. You should have told me, he said. Her expression hardened slightly. I didn't know if you were alive, she said. And if you were, she hesitated, then finished. I didn't know what you had become. A pause. I wasn't going to bring a child into your world. Dante let that sit, because she wasn't wrong, but she wasn't right either. His gaze sharpened. How old? He asked. Elena swallowed. 6. 6 years. 6 years of a life he hadn't known existed. 6 years of first steps, first words, first everything. Gone. Dante exhaled slowly, controlled, measured, but beneath it, something else was forming, something far more dangerous than anger. Because this wasn't just about the past anymore. This wasn't just about what had been taken from Elena. This was about what had been taken from him and what still existed. Out there. Waiting. Dante looked at her, his voice quiet but absolute. You're going to take me to them. Not a question, not a request, a decision. And Elena, for the first time since he had known her, didn't immediately say no. Elena didn't speak for a long time after he said it. "You're going to take me to them." The words sat between them, heavy, irreversible. Dante didn't repeat himself. He didn't need to. He had already decided. Elena moved first, not toward him, away. She turned, grabbing her coat from the back of a chair, her movements quiet but deliberate. There was no panic in them, no chaos, just the kind of control that comes from years of making careful decisions under pressure. "You don't get to walk in there like this," she said, her voice steady again. Dante watched her. "Like what?" "Like you own the situation." "I do." She shook her head once, pulling the coat around her shoulders. "That's exactly what I mean." She turned to face him fully now, her eyes sharp, clear. "This isn't a deal. It's not something you can control with money or threats or whatever it is you do out there." Her hand gestured vaguely toward the world beyond the apartment. "This is my life. And more importantly," she stopped herself briefly, then corrected, "her life." Dante didn't interrupt. That alone told her he was listening. "If you're coming with me," she continued, "you don't say anything you haven't thought through. You don't make promises you can't keep. And you don't," her voice tightened slightly, "you don't walk away if it gets complicated." Dante held her gaze. "I don't walk away," he said simply. Elena searched his face like she was trying to find the flaw in that statement. Then she nodded once. "Get in the car." The drive was quiet, not tense, not exactly, just full. Dante drove. Elena sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. The city moved around them in soft blurs of light and shadow, the kind of night that usually belonged to him. But tonight felt different. Because for the first time in years, Dante wasn't thinking about territory or business or power. He was thinking about a 6-year-old girl he had never met. The realization sat heavy in his chest, unfamiliar in its weight. "Does she know?" he asked after a while. Elena didn't look at him. "She knows she has a father," she said. "She doesn't know who you are." Dante nodded once. "Does she ask?" A pause. "Sometimes." That was all she said. It was enough. They pulled up in front of the building 10 minutes later. Smaller than the one Elena lived in. Older. The kind of place that had stories in the walls whether anyone wanted them or not. Dante turned off the engine. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Elena reached for the door. "Her name is Lila," she said quietly. Dante felt something shift. Lila. He repeated it once in his head, like committing it to something deeper than memory. Then he got out of the car. The apartment was warmer than he expected. Lived in. There were small things everywhere. Books stacked unevenly on a low table, a pair of shoes near the door, a drawing taped slightly crooked to the wall. Dante noticed all of it. He always noticed everything. But this was different. This wasn't a space built for efficiency or control. This was a space built for someone small. "Stay here," Elena said softly. He did. He stood near the doorway, his hands still at his sides, his posture unfamiliar in its stillness. He heard her voice from the other room. Gentle, different than the one she used with him. "Lila, can you come here for a minute?" A pause, then footsteps. Light, careful. Dante's attention sharpened instinctively, his focus narrowing to the sound, the rhythm of it. And then she appeared. Small, smaller than he had imagined. Dark hair, loose around her shoulders, wide eyes that took everything in at once, quick and sharp and observant in a way that made something in his chest tighten unexpectedly. She stopped when she saw him. Not scared, not exactly, just still, studying. Dante recognized that look, because it was the same look he saw in the mirror every morning. "Elena said you were coming," the girl said. Her voice was soft but steady. Dante blinked once. He hadn't expected that. "I did," Elena replied gently from behind her. "This is someone I want you to meet." Lila didn't move closer. She stayed exactly where she was, her gaze locked on Dante's face like she was trying to solve something. Children didn't lie well. They didn't pretend not to see things, and this one saw everything. Dante felt it hit him then, not slowly, not gradually, all at once. The shape of her face, the way she held her shoulders, the quiet intensity in her eyes. There was no doubt, not even a fraction, she was his. And the realization, it didn't feel like anything he had prepared for. It didn't feel like control or power, or even anger at what had been taken. It felt like something breaking open, clean, sharp, permanent. Dante took a step forward, careful, measured, the way you approach something that matters more than you know how to handle. "Hi, Lila," he said. His voice was quieter than usual, different. She tilted her head slightly. "Hi." A beat. "Do I know you?" The question landed gently, but it cut deeper than anything else had. Dante didn't answer immediately. For the first time in a long time, he chose his words carefully. "I knew your mother," he said. "A long time ago." Lila's eyes flickered to Elena for a second, then back to him. "Okay." She accepted that. For now. Children did that sometimes. Filed things away for later. Dante crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to her level without closing the distance completely. He didn't reach for her, didn't assume anything. He just stayed there, present. And Lila stepped closer, just one step, curiosity overriding caution. Elena watched it happen, her arms folded tightly across herself. "You don't get to just decide this," she said quietly. Dante didn't look at her. "I'm not deciding," he said. "Then what are you doing?" "Showing up." That made her go still. "Showing up isn't enough," she said. Dante finally turned his head slightly, his voice calm but absolute. "It is where I start." Elena's eyes searched his face, looking for something, arrogance, certainty, anything she could push against. But what she found instead was something else, something steadier. "Being powerful doesn't mean anything here," she said. "Not to her, not to me." Dante nodded once. "I know." "Do you?" she pressed. He looked back at Lila, who was now watching both of them with quiet, sharp attention, then back at Elena. "Yes," he said. A pause. Then, quieter, "But I'll prove it." Elena didn't respond. She just watched him. And for the first time since he had walked into her life again, she didn't see a man who controlled everything. She saw a man who had just realized there was something he couldn't afford to lose. And that realization, it had changed him, whether he understood it yet or not. It didn't take long. Things like this never did. In Dante's world, information didn't travel in straight lines. It spread, quietly, invisibly, from one person to another, from one room to the next, until it reached exactly the people it wasn't supposed to. By the third day, the shift was already there, subtle, but unmistakable. Dante felt it before anyone said a word. A call that ended too quickly, a meeting that ran too smoothly, a silence where there should have been resistance. He sat in his office, listening to a man explain numbers that didn't matter, and knew, without looking, that something had changed. "Stop," Dante said. The man across from him went quiet mid-sentence. Dante didn't look up from the file in front of him. "Who's asking about me?" A pause. Too long. "That's not what I asked," Dante added. The man swallowed. "It's nothing serious, just curiosity." Dante lifted his gaze slowly. "Curiosity," he repeated. The word didn't sound the same coming from him. "It's contained," the man added quickly. "No one's making moves." "Not yet." Dante leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. "Where did it start?" "Lower circles," the man said, then moved up. A name came up. A woman. Dante didn't react outwardly, but the air in the room changed anyway. "Elena Vale," the man nodded. "They're asking why you've been seen near her, why she matters." Dante closed the file in front of him with a soft, final sound. "And you told them?" "Nothing." "Good." Silence settled. Then Dante stood. "Find out who's asking first," he said, "not who's repeating it, who started it." The man nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." "And bring me names." By that evening, Dante wasn't guessing anymore. He was certain, because the first name that came back wasn't new. It was old. Old enough to carry weight, old enough to explain everything. Ricci. Dante stood in front of the window again, the city stretched beneath him, the reflection staring back sharper than before. Ricci wasn't just a rival. Ricci was history, the kind that didn't fade, the kind that waited. Years ago, Ricci had been part of the same structure Dante had clawed his way through. Same alliances, same deals, same understanding of how things worked, until they didn't. Until Dante made his move and left men like Ricci behind, men who didn't forgive that kind of shift, men who didn't forget. Dante's jaw tightened slightly, because now it made sense. The alley, the betrayal, the men who had been sent to finish what Ricci had started, and the ones who hadn't found Dante. So they found Elena. A slow, controlled breath left his lungs. She was never collateral, Dante said quietly. She had been a message. Elena felt it too, not in the same way, not with names and patterns and information, but in the small things. The way the street felt quieter than usual. The way a car idled a little too long outside the building. The way the air shifted into something she hadn't felt in years, something she had hoped never to feel again. Lila was sitting at the small table by the window, drawing quietly, her crayons spread out in uneven lines. Elena stood near the sink, her hands resting against the counter, her gaze fixed on nothing. It was back. She didn't need proof. She didn't need confirmation. She knew. A knock came at the door. Soft and controlled, not rushed. Her body reacted before her mind did. Every muscle tightened, every instinct sharpened. Lila looked up. "Mom?" Elena forced her voice steady. "Stay here." She moved to the door slowly, her hand hovering just above the handle. "Who is it?" "Dante." She exhaled. Not relief. Not quite. She opened the door. He stepped inside without waiting, his presence filling the space immediately. Different than before. More focused. More dangerous. "It started," she said before he could speak. Dante looked at her. Yes. That was all the confirmation she needed. Her shoulders dropped slightly, but not from relaxation, from recognition. "I told you," she said quietly. "I told you this would happen." Dante didn't argue, because she was right. "They know," he said. "How?" "I don't care how." His voice was calm, too calm. "I care that they do." Elena shook her head slightly. "This is exactly why I stayed away." "And it didn't stop them," Dante replied. That made her go still. Because that was the part she didn't want to face. "You don't understand," she said. "It did stop them. For years. For 6 years, nothing happened." "Because they thought you were nothing," Dante said. The words weren't cruel, but they weren't gentle either. "They thought you were disconnected, irrelevant, not worth the attention." A beat. "And now they know they were wrong." Silence. Heavy. Real. Lila's voice broke it softly from across the room. "Mom?" Elena turned immediately. "It's okay," she said quickly. "Just stay there." Dante followed her gaze, and something in him shifted again. Because this wasn't just about Elena anymore. It hadn't been for a while, but now it was undeniable. "They don't know about her," Elena said, her voice lower now, sharper. Dante didn't answer immediately. That was enough. Her eyes snapped back to him. "Dante!" "I don't know," he said. Not a lie, but not enough. Her chest tightened. "You don't know?" she repeated. "I don't know how much they know," he corrected, "and I don't deal in guesses." Elena stepped closer. "That's not good enough. It has to be." "No, it doesn't." Her voice broke slightly, then steadied again. "Because if they find out about her—" "They won't," Dante said. The certainty in his voice cut through everything else. Elena froze. "You can't promise that." "I can." "How?" she demanded. Dante looked at her, really looked. And when he spoke again, his voice dropped into something quieter, colder, more final. "Because anyone who comes near this door with that kind of intention," he said, "won't leave it." The words settled into the room like something alive. Elena felt it, the difference. This wasn't the man she had helped years ago. This wasn't even the man she had argued with days ago. This was something else, something built, something sharpened, something dangerous enough to stand between her daughter and the world, and not hesitate. She swallowed. "That's not a life," she said. Dante's gaze didn't waver. "It's the only one that keeps her safe." Another silence. Then, "Pack a bag," he said. Elena blinked. "What? You're not staying here tonight." "I'm not." "You are." Her jaw tightened. "You don't get to decide that." "I do," he said calmly, "because this is already in motion, and you don't get to pretend it isn't." Elena hesitated, just for a second. Then she looked at Lila, small, unaware, safe, for now. Her shoulders dropped slightly. Not surrender, not fully, but enough. "Just tonight," she said. Dante nodded once. "Just tonight." But they both knew. It wouldn't be that simple, because the past had already found them, and this time, it wasn't going to stay quiet. Dante didn't wait. He never did when something crossed a line. And this wasn't a line. This was a past mistake that had been allowed to live too long. By midnight, the names were already coming in. Not guesses, not rumors, facts. He stood in a dimly lit room far below the city, a place built for conversations that didn't exist on paper. The air smelled faintly of concrete and something older, something that never quite left spaces like this. Wyatt stood across from him, tablet in hand. "We traced it back," he said. Dante didn't respond. He just waited. Because there was only one thing that mattered now. Who? Wyatt glanced down briefly, then back up. It wasn't random. Dante's expression didn't change. He already knew that. "It never is," he said. Wyatt nodded once. "The men who went after you that night, they weren't just looking to finish the job." A pause. They were looking to send a message. Dante's jaw tightened slightly. He remembered the alley. The blood. The betrayal that had nearly ended him before everything he built even had a chance to exist. "What message?" he asked. Wyatt hesitated, not because he didn't know, because he did. "They were told," Wyatt said carefully, "that someone helped you." Silence. Cold. Heavy. Dante didn't move. "They knew?" he asked. "Yes?" "How?" Another pause. This one longer. Wyatt set the tablet down slowly. "That's the part you're not going to like." Dante finally looked at him, fully. "Say it." Wyatt exhaled once. It came from inside. The room seemed to narrow, not physically, but in the way everything else suddenly stopped mattering. "Inside where?" Dante asked. But he already understood. Wyatt didn't soften it. "Your side." Dante went still. Completely still. Not anger. Not yet. Something worse. Clarity. "Names," Dante said. Wyatt nodded. "There were 3 men running operations for you back then. All of them had access to movement reports. All of them knew where you were supposed to be that night." Dante's mind moved through them instantly. Faces, voices, decisions made years ago. 2 of them were gone. 1 dead, 1 disappeared. The third, Dante's gaze sharpened. "Marco." Wyatt didn't need to confirm it. The silence did it for him. Dante let out a slow breath. Marco. He remembered him clearly now. Loyal, efficient. The kind of man who didn't ask questions. The kind of man you trusted because he never gave you a reason not to. Until... Dante turned slightly, his voice quieter now. "Tell me exactly what he did." Wyatt picked up the tablet again. "After you disappeared that night, Marco intercepted communications from Ricci's people. They were asking questions, trying to figure out how you survived." Dante listened, every word precise, every detail locking into place. "Marco didn't answer them directly," Wyatt continued, "but he didn't shut it down either. A beat. He let something slip." Dante's eyes darkened. "What?" "That you weren't alone." Silence, sharp enough to cut. "He didn't give a name," Wyatt added quickly. "Didn't give an address, but it was enough." Dante's voice dropped. "Enough for them to start looking." Wyatt nodded. Yes? Dante looked away for a moment, his reflection faint against the dark glass behind Wyatt. And suddenly, everything made sense. The timing, the precision, the way they had found Elena. Not immediately, but soon enough, because they weren't guessing anymore. They were following a thread, and Marco had handed it to them. Why? Dante asked. It wasn't disbelief, it was calculation. Wyatt hesitated, then said it. He thought you were dead. Dante didn't react, but something in the room shifted anyway. He made a decision, Wyatt continued. If you were gone, Ricci would take control. Marco positioned himself early, gave them just enough to earn trust. A pause. And Elena became collateral. The word hung there, ugly, inaccurate, but technically true. Dante closed his eyes briefly, just for a second, because for the first time since this started, he wasn't thinking about strategy or retaliation. He was thinking about Elena, alone, young, standing in the middle of something she never chose, because she had helped him, because she had made one decision, and someone inside his world had turned that into a target. Dante opened his eyes again. They were colder now, steadier. Where is he? He asked. Wyatt didn't answer immediately, because this part had already been anticipated. Alive, Wyatt said finally. Different name, different city. He's been keeping a low profile for years. Dante nodded once. Bring him to me. Wyatt studied him carefully. You want him alive? Dante's gaze didn't waver. Yes. A beat. For now. Elena didn't know the details, not yet, but she knew something had changed the moment Dante walked back into the room later that night. It wasn't visible to anyone who didn't know him, but she did. And what she saw, it wasn't anger, it was something quieter, more dangerous. You found something, she said. Dante looked at her, then at Lila, asleep on the couch, small and peaceful in a way that made the rest of the world feel even harsher by comparison. Yes. Elena stepped closer. What? Dante didn't answer immediately, because this wasn't just information, this was weight, and once it was said, it couldn't be taken back. It wasn't just them, he said finally. Who? The men who came after me. Elena's chest tightened slightly. I know that. Dante shook his head once. No, he said quietly. You don't. She went still. What do you mean? Dante held her gaze. There was someone on my side, he said, someone who knew I wasn't alone that night. Elena's breath caught. No, they didn't know your name, Dante continued, but they knew enough to start looking. Her hand instinctively moved to her chest, like she could feel the past reaching for her again. They found me because of you, she whispered. Dante didn't correct her, because technically, she wasn't wrong, but it wasn't the whole truth either. They found you because someone I trusted made a decision, he said. Elena's eyes filled, not with tears, but with something sharper. Then it really was because of you, she said. The words weren't cruel, they were worse, they were honest. Dante absorbed them without flinching. Yes. The silence that followed was heavy, real. Years of consequences sitting between them. I lost everything, Elena said quietly, because I helped you. Dante stepped closer, not to defend, not to argue, just to stand there. I know. You didn't even know, she added. No, he said. I didn't. That was the truth, and it didn't make it better. It made it worse, because it meant all of it. Her fear, her silence, her life built on survival, had happened without him even realizing it. Dante's voice dropped. But I do now. Elena looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, she saw it. Not power, not control, responsibility, the kind that doesn't disappear just because time has passed. What happens now? She asked. Dante's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Now, he said quietly, I fix what should have never been broken. And somewhere, far from that room, A man who had once made a quiet decision years ago was about to learn exactly what that decision had cost. It didn't end in a single moment. There was no clean line where danger stopped and safety began. It faded, slowly, carefully, the way things do when they've been rooted too deep for too long. The men who had moved first were the easiest to silence, not because they were weak, but because they were predictable. Dante understood men like that. He knew how they thought, how they reacted when pressure closed in from every side. They disappeared from the board one by one, quietly, no spectacle, no noise, just absence. The kind that made others reconsider their next move. Marco was different. That wasn't quick, it wasn't clean, and it wasn't something Dante spoke about afterward. But when it was over, the past finally stopped reaching forward. No more shadows lingering just outside the edges of Elena's life. No more quiet threats disguised as coincidence. No more waiting for something bad to happen. For the first time in years, there was nothing coming. Elena didn't believe it at first. She couldn't. Even when the days passed without incident, even when the streets felt normal again, even when the silence stopped feeling like something that would break. Fear didn't disappear just because the danger did. It stayed, in habits, in instincts, in the way she still checked the locks twice before going to bed, in the way her eyes moved to Lila before anything else. Dante never told her to stop. He never told her she was safe, not with words. He understood something most people didn't. Safety wasn't something you said. It was something you proved. So he stayed, not in the way men like him usually did, not with distance or occasional appearances or controlled involvement. He was there, in the mornings, in the quiet moments, in the ordinary parts of the day that didn't matter to anyone else, but meant everything to someone who had never had them. He learned routines, Lila's school schedule, the way Elena made coffee without measuring, the exact time the sunlight hit the living room floor in the afternoon. He didn't take over, he didn't disrupt, he just integrated slowly, carefully, like he understood that forcing his way in would break something fragile. At first, Elena watched everything, every movement, every decision. She expected control, expected conditions, expected the moment where he reminded her who he was and what that meant. But it didn't come. Instead, she saw something else. The way he knelt slightly when he spoke to Lila, never towering over her. The way he listened when she talked, even when the story didn't make sense or didn't go anywhere. The way he never promised more than he could give, but never gave less than he said he would. Consistency. That was what unsettled her the most, because it was real, and real was harder to distrust. Lila adjusted faster. Children always did, not blindly, not without awareness, but with a kind of openness adults lost along the way. She didn't ask questions right away. She observed, the same way she had the first day, watching him, testing him in small, quiet ways. Would he come back when he said he would? Would he stay when things were boring? Would he still be there when there was nothing to gain? Dante passed every test, not because he tried to, because it didn't occur to him to fail them. One afternoon, Elena stood in the doorway of the living room, unnoticed. Lila sat cross-legged on the floor, a book open in her lap, her voice soft as she read out loud. Dante sat across from her, not distracted, not checking his phone, just listening, completely. "Did I say that right?" Lila asked, pointing to a word. Dante leaned forward slightly, his voice low. "Almost. Try it again." She did, this time slower, more careful. He nodded once. "Perfect." The smile that spread across her face. It was small, but it was real. And it did something to Elena's chest she wasn't prepared for. Because for the first time, she saw it. Not potential, not possibility. Reality. He wasn't pretending, he wasn't performing, he was there, fully, and he wasn't leaving. Elena stepped back quietly, retreating into the kitchen before either of them noticed her. She stood there for a long moment, her hands resting against the counter, her thoughts quieter than they had been in years. Fear had shaped her life for so long that the absence of it felt unfamiliar, almost wrong, but not bad, just new. Dante found her there later. He didn't announce himself, didn't break the silence. He just leaned against the doorway, watching her for a moment before speaking. "You're thinking too much." She let out a quiet breath. "That's not new." No, he agreed. A pause. Then, you can stop waiting, he said. Elena glanced at him. For what? For it to go wrong. Her eyes searched his face. And it won't? Dante didn't answer immediately, because he wasn't a man who made promises lightly. Not because the world changed, he said finally, but because I did. The words settled between them. Simple, but heavy. Elena looked away for a moment, then back at him. I don't know how to trust that, she admitted. Dante nodded once. I know. Another pause. Then, you don't have to decide anything right now, he added. You don't have to believe it all at once. He pushed off the doorway slightly, taking a step closer, but not too close. Just don't run from it. Elena studied him, longer this time. And slowly, very slowly, something in her expression softened. Not completely, not fully, but enough. Enough to let something else exist alongside the fear. Okay, she said quietly. Dante nodded once. That was all he needed. Not a promise, not forgiveness, just a beginning. Later that night, the apartment felt different. Not quieter, not louder, just full. Lila fell asleep on the couch again, her head resting against Dante's arm this time, her small hand curled loosely in the fabric of his sleeve. He didn't move, didn't shift, just sat there, still and steady, like breaking that moment would cost something he wasn't willing to lose. Elena stood nearby, watching, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was waiting for something to be taken from her. She felt chosen, protected, seen. Dante looked up at her, his voice low so he wouldn't wake the girl beside him. She's safe, he said. Elena held his gaze, and this time, she believed him, not because he said it, but because he stayed, and she finally understood. Love didn't have to arrive like chaos. It didn't have to come with fear attached. Sometimes it looked like this, quiet, steady, unwavering, a man who didn't walk away, a home that didn't disappear, and a life where neither she nor her daughter would ever be overlooked again.